What is going on, everybody? Jorge Aquino coming to you live and direct right here from the west side of Phoenix. It is Tormenting Tarmac. It's the podcast where the enthusiast never dies. I hope everybody's having a fantastic day. Um, Today is April the 25th. We're recording on a Tuesday, and boy, oh boy, do we have an episode for you. This has been something that I wasn't too sure we were ever going to get a chance to go ahead and do. And lo and behold, almost a year and a half into the game with Tormenting Tarmac, we've gone from interviewing wonderful enthusiasts within the Phoenix community as well as other parts of the country. And even though that's something that we're going to be continuing to do, we're elevating our game just a little bit today, ladies and gentlemen, because the person that I have on today, um, basically, in the words of David Letterman, he needs no introduction, but I'm going to do my best to give him a good one anyway. This man has been one of the uh, journalists that I listen to the most in a world of multiple outlets. His opinion, I think, is one of the best in the game right now, and he is, to me, one of the biggest faces in all of automotive media. Co-host of the Inevitable podcast, co-host of Spike's Car Radio, and senior feature editor over at Motor Trend. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jonny Lieberman. Johnny, how are you, sir?
I'm good, Jorge. You make me sound interesting.
Hey.
I hope I hope everyone after 5 minutes like, what is he talking about?
Hey, listen,
So,
if they don't think that this is interesting, then they're listening to the wrong podcast, my friend. But
there
Johnny,
you go.
first of all, thank you so much for being here on TT, man. It's an absolute pleasure.
My
Um,
pleasure.
how are you doing today? How's everything going in LA?
I'm good, man. I went skiing yesterday. I took my wife to the airport this morning. There's a Porsche 911 Turbo S sitting in the driveway that I haven't even driven yet.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, I got dropped off while I was at the airport, and it's gorgeous, and can't wait to have some fun with it. And yeah, man, it's a great day. High
Awesome.
of 68, so or something, or high of 73, currently 68. Life is good. Life is
You
good.
know what? You can't beat killer. You can't beat killer SoCal weather. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'm out here in Phoenix. I did tell you it's about 85. It's a beautiful day out. Like, don't get me
Hey,
wrong.
85 in Phoenix. I've been there, when it's 30 degrees warmer. I've been there,
Yep.
100. I was there one time because I used to have some family that was out there, and they all kind of moved away. But it was 113, and I was like, "Oh, Artie, how do you do this?" He's like, "Oh, it was 116 last week. This is no big deal." So
It's crazy. I mean, I'm
85 is
originally
all
from.
right. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna be
I
okay.
think so too. It's beautiful. I'll probably once I'm done with the podcast, myself and the kids will go outside, hanging out in the backyard a little bit, and be able to enjoy.
Nice.
Because I have the opportunity to work from home, so I might as well go ahead and take advantage of it.
Yep.
Um,
There you go.
Johnny, you've been in the game for a while now. I first discovered you when you went ahead and came on staff over at Motor Trend. I've posted this on the Instagram before, and it was the I think your very first big feature that you did for Motor Trend, which was the Corvette ZR1 with the 997 911 turbo that you did with Justin Bell
Justin
back in the
Bell.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That
it's
was
been a yeah. Go ahead.
No, that was my first big story. You're absolutely right. And I remember it was like I probably started work on Monday, and I think Tuesday is our editorial meeting, which, by the way, I get to miss right now because I'm doing this. Actually, I'm not even on staff anymore. But anyway, don't worry about that. I'm still on staff. Anyhow, and I remember they said, okay, we have this comparison coming up. Who wants to write it? And for some reason, nobody put their hand up. And so I put my hand up, and they're like, oh, really? That's kind of a big one. It's a cover story, your first story. And I'm like, well, look, if I can't do it, then you made a terrible mistake, and we can, end this quickly. And I remember it was actually one of the nicest moments of my career was our technical editor director, Frank Marcus, who lives in Detroit. He happened to be in the office, and I was at my desk, and he walks over and he's like, I was a little nervous when I heard you were going to be writing this story, but you did a really good job. And I was like, score, yes, like, all right.
Nice.
And yeah, I haven't stopped since then. And that
I was
was
gonna say that was what was that? That was 2009, right?
10. So it's getting on
2010.
13 years. It's almost 13 years. And yeah. And then that was a crazy one because the Porsche broke.
I remember
Um,
that.
the Porsche literally broke. I remember I was driving out to the Mojave Spaceport.
Mm.
They have a runway there that you can use. We were gonna do 0 to 150 to 0 tests, see who was quicker. And I remember on the way out there was this like bizarre noise. It sounded like fans, but it's a bizarre noise in the back of the Porsche, and it was like, I don't know if I can imitate it, but it was like something getting faster and slowing down. It turned out it was the turbos, and somehow due to like over revving the engine, the turbos had failed. So we had a naturally aspirated 911 after a couple runs. Because
Interesting.
they had the turbos on that was a 997.2. The turbochargers themselves were the variable vane turbos, so they could get bigger and smaller. So that's a classic problem with a turbo, right? A small one spins up fast, doesn't make a lot of power. A big turbo makes a lot of power, takes forever. You have turbo lag. So this would
Right.
actually change the size. And it was new tech at the time, and they got mad at us, and it was, I was like, that's a longer story, but yeah, it was that was my first thing I ever wrote for Motor Trend, and a Corvette beat a 911. So yeah.
I know. That is kind of interesting. The fact that, of course, Porsche has always been one of those manufacturers that always is trying to push the limit of what they can go ahead and do. They always take something that not everybody on and their mother is trying to do, and they go ahead and do it. But the Porsche is not perfect. They're as close as perfect as we can go ahead and hope a manufacturer to be, but they're not perfect. And it's very funny that they would go ahead and try and blame you in the publication. And
Well, I
whatnot.
mean, look, I'll tell you what happened. So this guy no longer works there, but he calls me and he's like, "Hey, like we looked at the computer. There's 40,000 over revs on this engine,
Right.
and the engine had like 4 or 5 thousand miles on it." And I was like, "Well, what's an over rev?" "Oh, that's 1 millisecond above red line." And I'm like, "So 4 seconds?" "Yeah, it's been over rev for 4 seconds." I go, "Okay. Did they all happen while we had possession of the car?" "No." "Okay, so you're saying whoever had before us most likely over revved it because we only put 500 miles on it and it had 5,000 miles on it."
Right.
"Yeah." "Okay, so why are you angry at us?" "Okay, good point." So you gotta push back sometimes. They're looking for someone to blame too, because it becomes an insurance question. Who pays for it? Blah blah blah. So,
I
but yeah,
totally
that
understand that.
was. But yeah, and that was again the first time I met Justin Bell, which was a big moment. And we're still friends. Like he just I went to the Amelia this year. They changed the name from Amelia Island to the Amelia, and he was the MC for the keynote dinner. Jeff Gordon was up there, and it was afterwards I like sat down and we had coffee and dessert and just talked, and it's been wild. It's been a wild run. So
Yeah.
still
No,
good friends with him.
Justin Bell's obviously still killing it. He's really jumped into the media world like big time, emceeing
Yeah.
stuff. He does a lot of stuff at the Daytona 24 hours, and I
Oh
think he's
yeah.
done a lot of stuff at Le Mans. And one of the things, and I didn't expect to go ahead and have this conversation, but you're here and I'm going to have it with you anyways.
Yeah.
One of the going back, because I actually, funny enough, I rewatched that video because that video, although no longer on the Motor Trend YouTube channel, can be found on motortrend.com's website. And
Wow.
I rewatched it, and it's so funny. It's like in 480p. Of course, it's in 2010.
Yeah.
But it was during the time where Motor Trend was, you guys were really getting into video, because this was right before Ignition was going to pop off. Right,
Oh
this
yeah.
was your first technically head-to-head episode, right? And what was really fascinating to me, Jonny, is like seeing in 2010 a C6 ZR1 and a 997.2 turbo, not a Turbo S because it was a 6-speed manual. What was fascinating to me is that I remember Justin talking about this, that the C6 was actually able to handle better at the limit than the 997.2 was. And even you had those thoughts. What was it to you about Chevrolet at the time that they were able to and I'm sorry, this is 13 years ago. So if you don't
Yeah.
remember exactly,
Well,
I totally understand. But for Corvette to be able to go ahead and pull that off against the 911, that's pretty remarkable, right?
it was. I mean, I remember that was the big thrust of that article, and I do remember it. But it was like, look, normally when you see these type of comparison tests, the American car is faster in a straight line, and the European car handles better.
Mhm.
And this is the opposite because it was all-wheel drive and turbo. The turbo 911 turbo was a monster in a straight line. The Corvette, the C6 especially, had some grip issues. It wasn't that quick in a straight line, but that thing was a race car. And really,
Mhm.
we should have done GT3 versus
The
ZR1, but
ZR1.
because the ZR1 was supercharged and it was turbocharged, and the ZR1 just did make so much power. But so Porsche, they do have the GT2,
Mhm.
which is rear drive and lots of power, and that really does compete more with the ZR1, but it wasn't. I'm trying to remember. They did make a 997. It was a year later. I think it came
Yeah,
out. That was the last
I
2000.
remember they made the .1 GT2 and then the 997.2 GT2 RS.
RS. Yeah, so that
Yeah,
wasn't out yet. That came out after we
like
wrote the story.
afterwards.
So
Yeah.
yeah, look, it just the Corvette handled better.
Hmm.
And we I remember it was 112 degrees. I'll never forget that. It was August in at Willow Springs, which is it was out just out in the middle of the desert north of
Yeah,
LA.
for sure.
We were just baking. It was so hot. I remember I wore shorts and like people are like, you want to wear shorts on video? I'm like, it's 112. Yeah, I'm wearing
What else
shorts
are
on.
you gonna do, man?
Yeah, it's fine. I also what was funny, I'll tell you actually what I remember the most about that um was I knew who Justin Bell was, like like he GT2 champion, guy had won Le Mans, famous lineage. I knew his dad was and all this. And I had this pair of like Pilates shoes that I got like on a Mazda launch. And so I don't know if
Mhm.
anyone listening knows Pilates, but they were
I
driving
do.
shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I show up wearing my driving shoes, and here's Justin, who's like literally won the 24 Hours of Le Mans. He shows up wearing, Chuck Taylors. And so I never wore Pilates ever again. I was like, okay, you know, this is
So
not needed. Yeah.
hilariously enough, I've had this conversation with one of my good friends who happens to be an engineer over at General Motors. Actually, the person who I went ahead and co-founded this podcast with, and him and I have talked about what to us is the perfect driving shoe, and to him, it's like the Adidas Sambas
Mm-hmm.
because they're very thin, they're very narrow. He's also a very skinny guy compared to me, and for me, I remember listening to you in a podcast talk about driving shoes, and you were like, Vans or Chuck Taylors work perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've since revised that. So there's this company called Allbirds. And
Okay.
my buddy Sergio, who man, you should see his garage. He's got some neat cars. I sent our mutual friend Clink, I sent her photos of like the Ferraris and Lambos and Astons this
Mm-hmm.
guy has hanging out. Anyhow, he goes, dude, you got to get a pair of Allbirds. I know you wear Vans, these are better. And I'm like, nope, Vans, I only wear Vans. And obviously he's got a little bit of cash. So he's like, I'm gonna buy you a pair. And so he literally has a pair sent to my like not only bought, but he had like his assistant like deliver them to my house. And I put them on and like I can't wear Vans anymore. And they're the
Yeah.
best driving shoes. They weigh nothing. It's almost like being barefoot. They're really, really good. There's also a company called Vivo, I want to say.
Evo.
Barefoot, like spelled like a bear, not like naked skin, but like a bear, barefoot. And they're kind of like it's a wide toe box, and the idea is it's like it doesn't like compress your feet. And that's why I like Vans because there's no arch support. I actually
Right.
like the idea of walk. I'd rather be barefoot if I could. And I think I'm gonna get a pair of these, and I think these are gonna be like even better driving shoes. But for right now, Allbirds are the way
Allbirds.
to
I'll have
go.
to take a look into that. See, I
Yeah.
have some struggle with shoes when it comes to that sometimes, Johnny, only because I suffer from like having flat foot.
Yeah.
And so like, I need the extra arch support sometimes. So like
So
even Chuck Taylor's can be
supposedly, if you listen to this company Vivo, the extra arch support is counterintuitive. It makes you more flat-footed. Uh,
interesting.
and like I've never really worn basketball shoes. I've basically worn Vans and Converse my whole life, and I have like insane arches. So I don't know. Who knows? But anyways, it's I just basically for me, like the tighter the shoe and the lighter the better.
I
And
agree.
tight meaning like the shoe doesn't wiggle around. I don't want my toes bunched up. And that's why I like stuff like Vans and these all
Yep.
great because it's just like canvas, on your foot, not leather, not like Nikes have like, plastic and all that.
Yeah. I can't. Unfortunately, there's two pairs of Jordans that I own that completely disintegrated after me not having worn them for about 3 years, and they were in perfect condition. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna rock my. I had a pair of Jordan 12 flu games, which are the black and the red ones, and I put them on, and literally after an hour of wearing them, they completely disintegrated, which sucked. So I
Yeah,
came
I
to
would
the
say Jordans are not good driving shoes. Way too
no,
fat.
they're not. Way
Yeah,
too
yeah,
big. Yeah.
yeah. You want just lighter the better. Yeah.
Exactly. So, Johnny, we talked about your humble beginnings there at Motor Trend and, getting that immense feature, Angus was the boss at the time. I remember him
Yeah,
being
yeah, yeah.
editor at large, and Edward Lowe coming up. But you've done some stuff prior to Motor Trend. I even remember you doing a video with Farah back at the very beginnings of the Smoking Tire, when I think he tore his knee or something like that, and you guys did a little interview of like, can you drive? And you're like, I'm all right. That
Yeah.
was one of my favorite episodes of
That
TST.
was funny because I'd known Matt for a long time, but we never really like hung out too much. I met him like at parties and stuff, and like
Right.
yeah, he I had an Audi R8
Mm-hmm.
press car at the time. It was a V10, and
This would have been
he
first year, right? First year of the V10.
first gen, yeah. I don't know if it was the first, it could have been the first year. I don't remember. It was first
Yeah,
gen for sure.
gotcha.
And he had blown his knee apart like snowboarding, and it was I was just gonna let him borrow the car, and he got it okay with Audi, like, and then he's like, I can't drive it. And I was like, well, what if I like shave my face to look like you? Because at the time he had that ridiculous like chin
It's the
strap.
the chops, yeah.
And yeah, it was really fun. But I
That
remember
was
it was
a
funny.
look, man.
Yeah. And I wore one of his like, his Alex Roy, 144 jackets. But
The police
um,
jackets, yeah, I remember that.
yeah, yeah. And what was funny was he'd never driven with me before.
Mm,
And if you hear him in the video, it's kind of sort of the start of like the one take, because it's really just stream of consciousness from Matt. He was like, whoa, you can drive, you can drive. He was like, he actually didn't think I could drive for I don't know why, whatever reason. Um, but yeah, that was fun. That was super fun. He had just moved to LA from New York.
right.
And yeah, the rest is history. I think I've been on his show now probably more than any other guest. It's a
I
lot of
believe
experience.
that that's the case. And to be fair, every single time I see that you're on the pod, like I listen to TST all the time. So if Matt Fair is listening to this podcast, Matt Fair, I'm a huge fan. But every single time I hear you are coming on, I'm like, all right, Lieberman's on, great. Like
We have a good time. Matt and I have
let's
a
get
good
the
time.
score counter. Like I'm like, all right, Zach, get the score counter out, bro.
Yeah, yeah, I know. That was unplanned, but yeah, we tend to drink too
Yeah.
much in podcasts, which is and with Matt, it's funny because most podcasts, like after an hour you're done, and with him, like after 2 hours, we know we have to turn it off because we're done, but we're ready to keep going. So
Yeah. It's
yeah.
always a great time listening to you guys. But
Oh, cool. Thanks. Appreciate
yeah,
that.
no, for sure. I appreciate the conversation that you guys always have, because usually what ends up coming out is there's always these snippets of gold, not necessarily of just entertainment, which is obviously the case, but there are things that I tend to learn, and one of the things that you've been a massive proponent for, and I shouldn't say proponent, but you really have been talking about electric cars
Mhm.
for a very long time. And I've talked about electric cars here on the podcast a bit too. I actually had the privilege of being able to drive the Lucid Air back in October.
Yeah,
We
nifty
have
car.
very cool car. We have
Yeah,
we have the stores here, as you probably know, here in the Scottsdale area, and then they have one of the plants
yeah.
just south of
The
Phoenix.
factory, the Lucid factories in Arizona in
It
uh
just outside of Casa Grande, if I'm not
Casa
mistaken.
Grande. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, which is probably like about an hour and 15 from where I'm at. And so I'm curious to know, you know, as electric cars become more prevalent in our community, Jonny, like what kind of effect do you see that having on car culture? And as enthusiasts, what should our expectations be?
Yeah, a huge question. A, I can't predict the future, so I don't know.
You're right.
B, it kind of goes to the core mission of Motor Trend, which is like we just, whatever the manufacturers are up to, we cover it. So, I was recently talking with one of the head, not Gordon Wagner, but another guy named Robert Lesnick, who is a designer at Mercedes.
Mhm.
And we're just having a nice chat, and I'm like, what are you working on? He's like, oh, we finished up all the cars launching in 2029. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, all electric? He's like, yeah, of course. He's like, gas is dead. So it's like the industry is just going, whether you like it or not, whatever
Right.
your feelings are, it doesn't matter. It's going electric. Now, the I understand people get really emotional about it. But the way I look at it, and again, maybe it's because I'm not specifically talking about your Mustang. It's more like the RAV4 is now going to be electric.
Right.
The
The Kia
all the car,
Sorento.
yeah,
I've
right.
got
All the
one.
cars
Yeah.
that have 2-liter turbo engines, they're now going to like be electric.
Mhm.
Double, triple the mileage and make double, triple the power.
Right.
So what are we upset about? And look, there's a whole litany of, I would just say, like, misinformation out there. Batteries die after 1 year and all these other things. It's all false. And the other thing is it's all just starting out. Like we just had a dude on the Inevitable, this guy Mujab Ijaz, who's a CEO of this company, Iron Next Energy, and you're going to see it in a few months in the BMW iX. So it's a battery that can go 600 miles on a single charge.
That's
Like,
crazy.
what is there to complain about? Like
Yeah.
at that point, like your gas car can't go 600 miles.
Right.
Like you'll charge when you sleep, which is what you're supposed to do anyways.
Mhm.
Yes, there will be infrastructure challenges, but again, it's like everyone's like, oh, like it's being shoved down our throat. Well, it's like, well, gasoline was shoved down your throat for 100 years and you didn't cry. Now, as far as like supercars, that gets interesting because what's the enemy of performance? Real performance is weight.
Wait.
Batteries at the moment are very, very heavy.
Mhm.
Stuff like the Lucid Air, which while it's rad and
5,500 pounds, man.
yeah, but the Gran
That's
Turismo Performance makes 1,050 horsepower, right?
it's
So
crazy. Yeah.
it's a blast. It drives well, but like a sports car is a challenge. So the way I see it, this is just a prediction, is
Mhm.
that the really high end stuff, the stuff that now has a V12, it's going to stay V12
Right.
because if you look at those, they aren't driven very much, and there's only maybe globally. I might be off one by a couple thousand either direction, but maybe 10,000 are made a year, and these cars are maybe driven less than 3,000 miles a year each. So if you're burning that gasoline, it's not a big deal.
Right.
Uh, they'll probably put a tax on them. The rich guys will pay it. Gasoline will get more expensive. The rich guys will pay it. It won't make a difference. Now, you know, like the other thing is, like I remember like in California here, Gavin Newsom announced that by 2035, you won't be able to buy a new gasoline powered car in California. And everybody was up in arms. All my like V8 friends, hot rod guys were like, oh, they're crying. And I'm like, well, first of all, you guys haven't bought a new car in 100 years, right? You only buy stuff from the 60s anyways. Second of all, it's cute that you think there will still be gas powered cars to buy in 2035. So I'm telling you, like, most of the cars you see being sold now will not exist as gasoline powered cars. Everything is going to become electric, except, like I said, I think very high end sports cars will remain V12s or maybe, flat sixes. I think the 911, the GT3 specifically, there's always going to be a place for them. And maybe, and I don't, we'll see where this goes, but maybe like real high end, heavy duty trucks
Right.
where,
Diesels. Right.
yeah, except that like, again, battery tech is just changing so fast, like, I remember when it was a huge deal that, a Ford Super Duty made 900 pound-feet of torque. And it's like, well, my Rivian, which I'm looking at right over there, that makes 908 pound-feet of torque. And then it's like, now the Ford makes 1,200 pound-feet of torque and the Super Duty diesel. And so does the Hummer EV, and
Yeah.
so it's like, they've got the electric cars just have such an advantage for stuff like that. Range is, of course, the issue, but again, like just the battery tech is changing so fast,
Mhm.
and if you have a 600-mile range battery, let's say, and if you hook up a trailer to, even if a diesel powered truck, if you hook up a trailer to it, a real heavy trailer, you cut the distance it can go in half. So like a Ford Super Duty currently tows only about 300 miles. It has a 600-mile range unloaded. It can tow a 27,000 pound trailer 300 miles. Well, if you get an EV battery that it can go 600 miles and you put a heavy trailer on it, it also gets cut in half. It's the same effect, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Trailers can get more aerodynamic. The batteries are going to change. So it might be the case. And by the way, the greatest thing for towing, with the exception of range, is electric. You want to move a heavy load, like, man, accelerating with electric kills diesel. And
The
it
smoothness of it, right?
the smoothest, but also like the fact that an electric motor makes maximum torque before it even starts to spin.
Right.
So it's really easy to tow with diesel. The range is the issue,
Mhm.
but I just think that'll all be addressed. And like I said, I mean, the real now, okay, well, what about sports cars? Well, sports cars make up a very, very tiny chunk of the market. They don't sell very well. You know,
Mm,
the best selling sports car, yeah, it might be the Mustang, which is
right.
like 120,000 units a year, maybe at its peaks, probably way below that now. So
Yeah.
it's just like it's such a tiny part of the market. Um, and like, and you know, and it's sad. It's like, you know, it's like with horses, right? Everybody used to have a horse. Now who has a horse, right? Well, a couple farmers and rich guys who race them.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of, you know, sadly, I think in a way where sports cars are going to go. Now, what about the 19-year-old kids who drive WRXs? That'll be a problem. You know, so maybe it's like start hoarding the WRXs now, or, you know, again, if batteries do get light, then you're going to have electric power that's light. And it's like, well, now wait a second, you know, okay, yes, it doesn't go bum 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 bum, doesn't make a noise. But if, you know, the next thing I'm pretty excited about are solid state batteries, which are supposed to be game changing, and super compact and super light and very energy dense. So if that happens, then stuff like the WRX and even the Miata, you know,
Hmm.
might have a second life, because it's not the motors. Electric motors aren't heavy. Like Lucid has shown that the motors are not heavy. It's the batteries that are really heavy.
Right.
You know, like, you know, just to go back to Lucid and well, different Corvette, the Z06, like, and I always tell people this. I'm like, look, you know, the Corvette, the new Z06, right? That motor, you know, what is it, LT5 or whatever they're calling it,
I
4 or
think
5,
that no, it's LT6 if I'm not mistaken. Because
6.
LT
Thank you,
yeah, because
thank you.
LT5 is the C7ZR1 motor if I'm not mistaken.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
LT6. Thank you.
Yeah.
670 horsepower, the most powerful naturally aspirated V8 of all time.
I know.
And then the Lucid has two 670 horsepower motors that fit inside of your suitcase. Not kidding. They
Yeah.
literally fit inside of a rollerboard.
It's
Um,
crazy.
yeah, you know what I mean? And with more torque than the Corvette, I should add. So it's just the, you know, the batteries are the issue. And so I think that's going to start changing.
Mhm.
And you know, there's just all every day, and I follow a lot of this stuff because it's my job. I'm not really that, you know, sexually attracted to batteries, trust me, but I pay attention to this stuff. There's just new chemistries constantly coming out, and it really looks like solid state is gonna, you know, not it's 5 to 10 years off, but like once that happens and you don't have
Mhm.
liquid batteries, that's the weight is, you know, the cooling and everything and the lithium. You know, once you have solid state iron batteries that can be 3D printed that don't weigh anything and hold more power than lithium ion does currently, game on. You know, it's gonna change everything. So long answer. And you know, I always tell people, like, if you're not excited about EVs, figure out a way to go drive a Rivian, go drive a Lucid, then come talk to me seriously and tell me you're
Right.
not excited about the future of electric vehicles, because they're expensive, those two, but they are
Right.
going to be awesome. You know, it's going to
They
be really,
are.
really good.
And I'm really hoping that Lucid can go ahead and hopefully, you know, they've got Air right now. They've got their Lucid SUVs coming and
Yeah,
whatnot. I
the
hope that
Gravity. Yeah.
the Gravity. I hope that the brand as a whole can really figure it all out. That they make sure that the sales that they want are the right ones. Because honestly, they have such a wonderful. To me, I really like that car. I didn't drive Grand Touring Performance. I drove regular Grand Touring, so it's the 800 horsepower
Oh,
one,
yeah.
which
Well,
I guess, excuse me, it's so slow, man. My God,
right.
Johnny, I swear to
Yeah.
God. Like I
Yeah. So
it was
look,
my
I mean, you know, since you mentioned the inevitable, the one that, so today is a Tuesday, the one that's coming out this Thursday is with my buddy Misha Mansour, who has a
shout out to
um
Misha, man. He's awesome.
yeah, he has a McLaren I'm breaking news here, but he had a McLaren 765 LT Spider, and I let him drive the Grand Touring Performance. And again, you know, he was like blown away at the speed of the Lucid. Again, you know, the 765 LT is a bafflingly quick supercar, hypercar, basically. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you know, there's very little that goes that quick. He was shocked by how quick the Lucid was, and then and we took it up, you know, up in the canyons, and he loved it. You know, and he'd driven a Plaid before, and very impressive in a straight line, but no brakes, can't really turn. This brakes for days, turns, really wonderful front end, and like, you know, I've told this story a bunch, but David Lickfold, who's the vehicle dynamics head at Lucid, he redid the front suspension on the air, and what he did was he turoed a Porsche GT3 RS, and he drove that. Then he drove the air, and then he went and typed into the laptop, and then he drove the Porsche again. Then he drove the Lucid, made more adjustments, and so that's what he was going for with this sedan.
Right.
Was like, what is a GT3 RS like? And they just drive shockingly well for what they are.
They really do.
Yeah.
You could tell that, and I said this because I recorded a podcast about it, and the first thing that I went ahead and said is, this is a four-door sedan that weighs almost 6,000 pounds. But what you need to understand is, unlike some other electric car manufacturers, there was enthusiasts behind the way that this thing drove as opposed to perhaps another car. And I'm not taking a
Yeah.
shot at the other car manufacturers. I'm talking about just the fact that whoever was the ones that were making that Lucid Air, they're
Yeah.
enthusiasts, and their favorite thing to do is to drive.
Yeah, so Peter Rollins, he's the CEO and CTO, Chief Technical Officer of Lucid. He was an engineer at Lotus. He was chief engineer at Jaguar. He built the Model S, the Tesla Model S, which hey, say what you want. Like you strip that car down naked and look at its chassis, and it's like forged aluminum components. Like that's a very sporty car underneath all that. And now he's just doing this, and then like I said, David Lickfold, he was I think at Jaguar, worked on believe the F Type. So he knows sports cars, and they have a lot of money. They the Saudi Arabian sovereign wealth fund really is bankrolled Lucid. And look, they're not trying to be Tesla, believe it or not. They see themselves as a luxury brand first and foremost, and that their cars are expensive. And they're within, if you look at like a big Mercedes, like an S63, that's kind of what the Grand Touring Performance, in terms of cost, they're comparable.
Mm-hmm.
And the Lucid makes double the power, so
Right.
it's yeah, it's an interesting company, and I think they're going to be okay. We'll see. The SUV, they probably should have launched with the SUV first, but they didn't. But that's coming. I want to say like September, October. You'll see the Gravity.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it. I've already started to see R1S's on the road here in Phoenix, Rivian's SUV, and that's a good looking SUV. I'm starting to
Yeah,
see a
good
lot more
design.
R1Ts. Of course, I know you've got yours. You've had it for just a little over a year now, right?
No, not even yet. I got it in
Oh,
June.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh, it was in
10
June.
months.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha. But it's been, I've that truck it does things that a truck shouldn't be able to do the way that
yeah.
it drives. I haven't driven one, but I've seen plenty of videos to say, yeah, that doesn't seem right. But how did they do it? Like, shout out to them. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the secret sauce with the Rivian is 4 motors. So each wheel
Right.
having its own power is just, it's a game changer for off road. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the videos where it's like going up against like those monster diesel trucks and like a tractor pull, and like it just silently beats everything.
Yeah.
Um, for me, one of the biggest eye-opening moments was I went with a Hodinkee, the watch blog, or whatever they are, watch site, and we shot a video out on a dry lake bed, actually out on El Mirage, and they brought a Range Rover, and it was the full fat, 527 horsepower Range Rover V8, and I drove that, and I brought my Rivian, and like, wow, like it wasn't even close in terms of like not only speed but like handling and control on a dry lake bed. Rivian just shamed the Range Rover, and these guys are like off-road experts. And then the other weird thing about it was I was on the launch of the Range Rover Sport, and the chief engineer for Land Rover, although they're not called Land Rover anymore, JLR. He's like, oh, you got a Rivian? I go, yeah. And he goes, we got one. We got our hands on one, and we're shocked by. And I thought he was going to say how capable it is off road, because that's kind of why I bought it. And he goes, the quality of the interior, like it's so nice. Like, how do they do that? It's like, yeah, it really is a nice. I always forget about that part. Literally,
Right.
the last reason I bought it was because of the interior. And to be fair, when I drove the Rivian initially, we went cross country. We did this thing called the Transamerica Trail, and it's a road that goes from North Carolina to Oregon, completely off road. It's 7,700 miles long, and we drove
The TRX was your support truck, if I'm not
we brought
mistaken,
our
right?
little TRX,
Yeah,
our
yeah.
giant jumbo TRX, which we beat to hell. Poor truck. And yeah, I'll tell you this. Look, as a big that was my long term of that Ram. And I thought that was the best pickup truck ever made. And the Rivians did better. They really did better off road. And I was shocked by that. But you know, they were just filthy the whole time we had them. They were filthy and overloaded. So I didn't even notice the interior other than like, you need more cup holders. There's no place to put anything. But we had 4 grown men, actually, and some women too. But like at any one time in my truck, there was 4 people, adults, with all their stuff on like, you know, essentially a month and a half long camping trip. And they were really overloaded, but even then it was just awesome. So I didn't notice the interior, you know, like we were looking at the screen a lot, but it's because it was in this cool engineering mode where you could adjust every single parameter that there was on the truck. So you can make up your own modes every day, which was really fun. But I got back and I'm like, I got to get one of these. This is actually what I want. And I had at the time I was going to get a Lexus GX 460 because I just wanted my own off-roader for a bunch of reasons. And I was like,
you're in California, brother. That's what you do, man.
Yeah, just look, I can get any car I want. I'm very lucky. I call whoever. But for instance, we were supposed to record this podcast yesterday, but it was last minute. I went on a ski trip because Big Bear's like an hour and a half away. And not owning my own car that can go in snow, I had some things, I can't remember what it was, but something was scheduled. And like, the day before we're leaving, they call up, they're like, hey, that thing's been damaged. Like, you can't have it. And like, we had a cabin that we're going to be in for 3 days. So I was able to luckily call Chevy and be like, you got a truck? And they gave me a truck. Or actually, maybe it was Rand. I can't remember. But my point is, I was like, you know what? I just want my own. I want to be independent. And like, the other thing is with off-roaders, if you really do, true off-roading, real off-roading, you're going to scratch something. It's just inevitable. As we like to say, something will get scratched if you're crawling on rocks. And after,
and if it doesn't, you're not doing it right, Johnny?
Yeah. But after 18 years of going off-road, scratching or banging something, and then they're always nice. They never say anything, but go, hey, this is Johnny. Yeah, just so you know, I scraped the bumper. I flattened the tailpipe. I got the wheel. I'm like, I just want my own, and that way I don't have to call anybody. Am I still taking other trucks off-road and damaging them? Absolutely. Will I ever stop? I hope not. We just destroyed 4 trucks the other day. Like, it's great. It's the best.
Love to see it, man.
Yeah. We dropped a poor Silverado in a hole. It was awesome. But but we used a Toyota to fix it, so it was great. But I just wanted my own, and to me, it came down to I was looking at the Jeep 392,
right?
Which is awesome truck. And I have a 6-year-old, you have a 6-year-old. At the time he was 5, and he was in the back of the Jeep, and I was trying to talk to him, and I just couldn't hear him on the freeway going like 72 miles an hour.
And this is with the roof on, correct?
Oh, with the roof on. And they're just loud inside. They're just loud. And I'm like, you know what? Like, and my wife would be the one who's primarily driving it and like not going to be into it. And so I was like, all right, going to get the Lexus. And then I'm like, the Lexus is good.
Right.
But to make it really great, you got to do a little bit of aftermarket stuff to it. Whereas the Rivian is just bonkers out of the box.
Right.
And, I was just like, this is the best off-roader. Like the only, honestly, the only things that really challenge it or would do better on rocks would be like the Bronco Raptor, the Braptor,
right?
The Hummer EV, like really purpose-built stuff.
But those things are they're wider than my house, though. That
well, the Rivian's not narrow.
No, it's not. But like you being in Los Angeles, like maybe in Phoenix where it's a bit more spread out. You know what I mean? It might be a little bit more conducive to be able to use a Braptor or be able to use a 392 or an EV Hummer. But you in Los Angeles, it's tough.
Yeah. I mean, the 392 is mercifully pretty narrow, but the Bronco Raptor is ridiculous. I had a TRX for a year. And that's the widest passenger vehicle, as far as I know, ever sold. So it's 88 inches wide. A Hummer H1, which remember has an engine between the seats, is 86 and a half inches wide. So the TRX, an inch and a half wider, it's just ridiculous. And I had to deal with that in LA for a year, and it was it's rough. But that said, I mean, I think the R1T is like 82 inches wide. So it's a little bit, it's like 2 inches wider than like a Defender. It's not the end of the world. It's just a great truck, and I love it. And and again, it also has 835 horsepower, which I
So
like,
much.
a Raptor R 700, TRX 702, like, man, I love that truck. I love driving it. So yeah, it's cool.
Well, I'm curious to know because you mentioned the fact that with the Rivian that you have it, and then previous, looking at the G392 and looking at a GX,
Yeah,
and I know that you have the Alpha still in the garage, right?
I do. Yep, yep. For
Yeah.
the time being,
So, which is awesome, by the way. I think the TIs are very, very cool cars.
I love it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
been perfect. 22,000 miles, one dead
Oh,
battery, and that was COVID related. Yeah, it's been great.
shout out to Alfa Romeo for definitely getting everything sorted on that car, because as a platform driving perspective, that thing is just cool. And it
Yep.
was always just the whole like, oh, I'm scared to own it because it's an Alpha and stuff like that.
That was all. I could do an hour on how that was all blown out of proportion. But long story short, can I just tell you what that was?
Of
So
course.
a bit of shall we say, fiat software leaked into the quadrifolio,
Okay.
and maybe even the first year TIs. But what it was when the cars detected there was a less than a quarter of a tank of gasoline, it
Mhm.
would go into like a limp mode,
Okay.
which journalists interpreted as like, oh, it's brick, the car is ruined. Now, what was happening, and this mostly showed up with the quadrifolios, because as you got low on gas and we're pulling 2G sideways, the gas would slosh at a 45-degree angle on the tank. The software code would get triggered, and it would go into a limp mode. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the car. It was literally that it was low on, not even low on gas. It was just like it
The
thought it
gas moved to
was
another
the
side
tank.
of the tank. Right.
Yeah. And I remember I was talking to a Dodge engineer, wonderful man who's told me so many awesome secrets over the years. But anyways, he's like, yeah, we're like, you idiots. Like, how did you let this go onto the quadrifolio? Like, it's fine on any other Fiat you make, Fiat 500L, like, great. If it's below a quarter tank, limit the performance. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But on a quadrifolio, you can never do that until it actually runs out of gas. And it was like just that first year, and every journalist, but then Alpha they never said anything publicly. And again, Alpha never admitted this to me. This was a Dodge guy who happened to,
Right.
at the time, FCA, same company, now it's Stellantis.
Stellantis. Yeah.
And if you look up the reliability of Alphas compared to, say, their peer group, Audis, BMWs, Mercedes, the Alphas are more reliable. And again,
Mm.
not 22,000 miles is not a ton, but I've had the thing for 2 years and 3 months, and like the only thing that went wrong was this dead battery. And when I did yell at Alpha, like, why'd this battery go dead? They were like, look, during COVID, supply chain issues, we took a bunch of batteries from Turkey because they were available. We put them in cars. They've all failed. And 90 minutes later, I was back on the road because I live a mile from an Alpha dealer, and they just put in a new battery. So
Love to see that.
it's a killer car. That said, it's going away in about 9 months. So
I gotcha. Lease
lease
is
is up.
up.
Lease is up.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm curious to know because, I'm curious to know, you've been in the game for what, like 20 years, maybe a
18
little
years.
bit more.
18 years. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
How do you feel that your taste in cars has changed since you started? Like,
It hasn't
are
at
they
all.
really?
And
Okay.
I just, when I got into it, I liked extreme vehicles, and I'm and I think the Giulia TI is great. A little boring for me. Should have got the quadrifolio. So I think I'm replacing it with the GR Corolla.
Oh,
Uh,
excellent
Toyota.
choice.
Yeah. Yeah. My
Because
wife said to
you're
me,
a former Fiesta ST owner. I'm a
I
former
got rid of the
Focus ST
Fiesta
owner.
ST, bought a Rivian. I miss having a miniature car with a manual. And
Yep.
my wife said to me, like, you can get another car, but the monthly payment's going to be less than the Giulia. She's like, because like the Rivian's not cheap. And
Right.
so, I do okay. We make some money, but the Rivian's not cheap. I'll just put it like
No,
that.
for sure. I get you.
Um,
And you
and
bought it at the right time too.
I put my deposit down at the right time. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I got my truck was 86,000. That same truck is now 106,000. So I got the original pricing because I got my deposit in early.
Love that.
Um, and I got, and here's the other thing, a lot of people, I got no discount. They don't do, they're such a new company.
Right.
They don't do, if I would have bought any other truck in the universe, I could have been like, hey, Ram, give me 10% off.
Hey, I'm Mr. Hi there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, friends and family discounts. All automakers have them.
Right.
The Julia, I got like I forget what it was, but I got some nice discount on it. But Rivian full fat, I paid the full freight. But anyway, so yeah, so like I started writing about cars on my when I owned my second WRX,
Mhm.
and I miss stuff like that. And to me, if Subaru wasn't so weird and like just kind of like let the STI die on the vine, the
Right.
GR Corolla is what like the new STI would have been like. Maybe a little more power. The Subaru would have had a little more power, but this thing,
Sure.
I am so in love with that car.
It is a
Uh,
very cool car. I've seen
it's
a
just
couple
great.
already here in the Phoenix area. I hope that the dealerships get their heads out of their asses with the ADMs, where they're asking for 20
Well,
grand
that
over.
I'm not
But
gonna. Yes, that I can
right,
get a little. I can get some
of
corporate help
course,
in
yeah,
getting around that, because look, all those places. I remember I was going to buy a Civic Type R when I
right.
bought the Julia. Those the other car I was going to buy was the Civic Type R, and weirdly they were about the same price. And I remember I talked to a friend at Honda. I'm like, can you point me at a dealership that doesn't do this? Because
Mhm.
it was a $47,000 car, I think, fully loaded, and they were selling them for like 60 something. This is before COVID.
Mhm.
And yeah, he was like, yeah. So I talked to a dealership and I was gonna get it, and then I was just like, I think I want this Julia. So,
Well,
but
I think you made I think it's an excellent choice, and I
yeah,
think going GR Corolla is going to be fascinating.
it
I
was
am curious to see that.
yeah, it was at the time I already had a Fiesta ST, and I'm like, do I want two like kind of the same cars? And so,
Right.
and again, the Julia is great. My father-in-law is going to buy it. It's he loves it's a great car. It's just for me, it's like I only occasionally drive it, and I
Hmm.
just want I like cars that I just fall in love with because they're so special.
Sure.
And the non-quadrifoglio Julia is very good. It's just not special. The
Right.
quadrifoglio is special. In
I got you.
retrospect, I would have paid the extra
Gone
$2
QV.
a month to get that, but
I
now
got
it's
you.
Toyota. And yes, we're talking about Toyota and Alfa Romeo in the same breath, but hey,
Hey, listen, you know what? I love the fact that Toyota decided to go ahead and bring in the GR Corolla, because I was one of those enthusiasts that was really upset that we weren't going to get GR Yaris over here.
yeah,
And I was like, listen, if there's anybody in the world other than Japan who is going to appreciate this car, and maybe the UK folks, it's going to be the United States. But then at the same time, and I've heard you talk about it, I've heard so many journalists talk about it, we can say that we want it, but we don't ever fork over the money as much as we'd
yeah,
like to, and that's
yeah.
the problem. And I
Two
yeah.
points. 2 points. So one is I have a lot of friends in the UK that have driven the GR Yaris, and like
Mhm.
a lot of them are like, mate, overrated. Like
Really.
people they fell in love with the idea of it. So
Mhm.
when I drove the GR Corolla, I was expecting it to be overrated because the internet was going gushing. And then I drove it. I'm like, okay, this is 3 times better than I could have possibly imagined. Like this is the Corolla is such a magnificent car. Like absolutely spot on, everything I want, nothing I don't, just killer. And then the other thing is, and I don't want to say like I don't want to say I have to do this. I don't want to be like ethically, morally bound to this, but I am a kind of a big believer in supporting the industry you work in.
Sure.
And I do like to buy cars that we at Motor Trend we value. So like the Alpha was our car of the year. I think it was 2018 or 19. I can't remember.
Mhm.
And the Rivian was our truck of the year. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is,
Right.
and I think that's important. And I can't say enough good things about the Toyota. And I do. I think I almost as of right now. What is it? April 26th, 2023. That's my next purchase.
Awesome. And there's still 9 months left, too.
Anything can happen because again,
Exactly.
I had ordered a Lexus. It was coming. In
Right.
fact, I wanted this. You can't see, but the color of my shirt. I'm wearing a burgundy shirt. And I wanted, they do make a red GX. They've never sold any, but it is on the website. And I ordered one, and they're like, it was middle of COVID, and they're like 9 months minimum. Like that's such a weird order right now.
Yeah.
And so that kind of saved me for that time I got the Rivian. Was like okay, and yeah.
Awesome. I've got a couple more questions
Yeah,
left because
go,
I
go, go,
obviously
go.
want to be
I
very
can go a
careful
little
with your
long
time.
too. I can go a little
Oh,
long.
Hell yeah, then when you
Let's
got
go.
Jonny Lieberman
This
on the
is fun.
podcast, let's do it. So now I'm curious because we've been talking a little bit about the manufacturers here, Johnny, and in the last few years, we've really had the influencer kind of like come in and cause a big boom
Mm,
within automotive media to an extent. Some influencers really are car enthusiasts, and you love to see it, but also the manufacturers are going towards those influencers who aren't, and sometimes
sure.
because of that maybe us as the public who want to go ahead and get some understanding of what this car is, we sometimes don't have that real opportunity to do so because basically so and so might be paying these influencers to go ahead and drive these cars around and whatnot.
Yeah.
And where should the manufacturer maybe draw the line, or where
It's
as
a great question.
yeah,
It's a great question. Yeah, I mean, look, the thing about paying an influencer is they'll say whatever you tell them to say.
right,
And like, yeah, a lot of times what they're saying is true. A lot of times it's not that true, but they say it the same way. Whereas, as dirty as the automotive business is, and every year, somebody discovers that, oh my God, they reviewed a Chevy in the same magazine where there's an ad for a Chevy. They're on the take. Every year someone comes to that
yep,
revelation. We try to maintain a pretty good church and state separation between editorial and publishing or sales. I've been banned for life by Ferrari once so far. I'm trying to get to 3 times. Peter Robinson famously was banned for life 3 times by Ferrari.
my
Uh,
gosh,
I've been hauled into meetings. I've had 2 different PR people say this is the lowest point of my career, having to like deal with me. Um, and I can say Mercedes and McLaren both said that at various points. So we will say things that they don't like. I've had a PR guy punch me, like physically punch me. And could have pressed charges, didn't. No, he was pretty. He was anyway. It doesn't matter. I've been physically assaulted because of my opinions about a car. I'll put it like that.
right,
Um,
yeah.
Sadly, people have been fired based on stuff I've written. And yes, and the Motor Trend is published, but I'll make just focus on me for the purposes of this podcast. I know people have been fired, which sucks, but like, we're critics. We're critical. Influencers, to my knowledge, aren't. That's not the business they're in either. They're kind of
Right.
just like hype people. Like, it's like they're making commercials.
Mhm.
We try not to do that. And everyone's like, oh, they like Rolls Royce flew you to south of France and gave you a lobster. Yeah, so did Scion, or I guess they're out of business, but so did Kia. Kia has better lobster than Rolls Royce, actually. It's like yes, everybody's bribing us. We live a good life. But again, at the same time, like, I've had a lot of really tough moments
Mhm.
where we published something. And I remember one, we said something bad about a Honda Accord, to the point where the head of Honda Accord in Japan flew to LA to have a meeting with us to talk about a particular sentence. That's how
Mhm.
seriously they took it. And it's like yeah. I mean, anyways, to go back to your question, I tell PR people this all the time. It's not exactly an original thought, but I'm like, look, PR, what are you guys really doing, right? You're telling a story. You're framing this vehicle out of all the other little sporty things out there. Here's why the GR Corolla is best. That's your job. Well, if the marketing department is just going to pay an influencer, you're out of a job. Like, what do they need you for?
Right.
And so I think we've seen less of that. And I think a lot, there was a lot of influencers a while ago. And I think, the good ones are still around. Like, I think Supercar Blondie, like, I think she
Yeah.
does a really good
She's
job.
killing it.
Yeah, but she just does a good job. She knows her audience. She's not really doing car reviews. She's just like, look at this cool feature. You
Mhm.
know, she in my version, she's doing like a shorter version of like Doug DeMuro. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
he's just like, here's all the features of the car. She does the 90-second version as opposed to his 30-minute version.
Right.
She's doing great. He's doing great. Um, you know, um, and I'm not going to speak bad about anybody on the record, but I mean, look, I know a guy who did an advertisement, and man, you could tell, and man, did everyone watching it know. And he's sort of out of it now. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a weird thing, the influencer. And I sort of, I sort of straddle both worlds because I have an outsized social media presence compared to most people with my job.
Right.
A lot of manufacturers kind of like view me as an influencer,
Mhm.
but I'm still, I'll still trash something if it's terrible. And again, and it's not like we're looking to trash, I mean, the what do I put this? The guiding principle I work under, I got from Angus McKenzie, who said, the way we approach it is we want to love all cars and we're disappointed when we don't.
Right.
Versus what a lot of sites and people do is we want to hate everything and we're shocked when we like something.
Yeah.
So we want, we love cars. That's why we do this. That's why,
It's a very half empty, half full type of view on cars.
Absolutely. But I mean, if I get asked this question a lot is, did you ever get bored talking about cars? And it's like, never, not for 1 second. I could literally talk about, and I kind of do now because of all these podcasts, but I literally talk about cars all the time. To me, it's endlessly fascinating, especially
Right.
now because the industry is going through the most disruption it's ever gone through.
Right.
I love car. I literally love cars. And I, when they're bad, and it's not like a car is like all bad. Usually there's like a couple bad things about it.
Mhm.
It freaks me out. Like, I will say, like, for instance, like the Volkswagen ID4, I find the window switches so abhorrent that I can't take it seriously as a car
Right.
because they did this thing where it has two switches for four windows and a button to switch between them. And it's such a
Stupid.
cheap out. It's such a cheap out
Yeah.
that it makes my blood boil. So yeah. So that is my influencer spiel, if you
Right.
will.
No,
Uh,
I get that because I remember because you always do the ask me anythings. You do them like every couple of weeks. You
yeah,
get
yeah, yeah.
bored. They're the most funnest thing. I will literally go through every story and read the question and answer because I do get a good kick out of a lot of them because your sarcasm is always the best.
Thank you.
But
I
one
actually
of
put way too much work into those, but thank you.
that's
Yeah.
not surprising, but it does entertain me, and I know it entertains a lot of your followers. But sometimes, and I'm sure that and I'm sure you've gotten this before, there are times where you do go ahead and take questions very seriously. And I remember one of them going back to kind of the influencer slash manufacturer, what can they get away with, what they shouldn't get away with. Singer, as in reimagined by Singer, the 911s, not
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Zinger, the
yeah,
new
yeah.
Hyper. And I don't know if this has changed over the last few months or years, Johnny. So you let me know. But I know a couple times you've addressed it, and it actually made me gain more respect for you. And I don't want to be rude, but no, I'm just gonna be honest. It made me lose a little bit of respect for Singer. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but there was the way that you said it and the way you framed it was they wanted to basically review what you had to say before that publishing went out. Am
Yeah.
I correct in that assessment?
Yeah, so here's the deal. So they claim they're very paranoid that if you ever say Singer 911, it's like saying Beetlejuice, like something bad will happen, and Porsche will literally show up at their factory and put them out of business. So they say because of that, you have to sign something that says Singer gets to review your review of their car before you publish it.
Hmm.
And me and Farah, the only ones I know who've just flat out refused to sign it. And big deal. I don't care. I've driven everything else in the world, and like, okay, they took a 964 and they put a big engine and sticky tires on it. Woo. Yes, they're very pretty cars, but I've never driven one, and I've brought it up, I don't know, 100 times. They know where I live. I've run into like their test drivers. We do the same drive loops.
Right.
I've run into them at gas stations, like, hey, you should let me drive this thing. Like they're always, and when they're new, they're always like, oh, I will. In fact, a friend of mine just went to work there not long ago. I should text him during this podcast. I guess we're running out of time, but like he's like, no, nah, don't worry about it. And like, can't drive it. Just they just won't let me drive their cars. I had dinner last night with a buddy who owns two, and he was kind of told like, don't let him drive it. Like, well, we're not going to warranty your car if you do that.
The fact that
So,
they can get away with that is so weird, but
I mean, hey, it's what it is. No, no, like, am I Mr. Integrity? Like, no, like I recently had to so I drove a Bugatti on a runway, the one at the Florida Space Center, and I
yep. You
tried
just
to go
talked about it on SCR the other day. That was
yeah, I
awesome.
tried to go 250 miles an hour, failed. But anyways, but
245
they
ain't
were
no
like,
joke, man.
yeah, but they were like, listen, we have to review your article. Or I
Right.
should say, NASA needs to review your article. I'm like, no, like, absolutely not. First Amendment to the Constitution, freedom of press, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no, NASA has to review the article. And I'm like, no. And they're like, we're not going to send you the photos because they had their photographer there because of security clearance until you send us the article. And I'm like, I guess, I have to. Now, uh, will that change anything? Like, no, they just don't want the word NASA to appear in the article. They wanted to just say, like, shuttle runway or whatever they want. And
Mm.
I sent it in, and it was, no changes. Well, I said V16 one time instead of W16. Bugatti saw that one. But uh my thing though is I don't want an OEM to review the article. And this happens in other countries. And this happens all the time when I'm interviewing like a German executive, and they'll say, could you submit the questions you're going to ask them beforehand?
Mm.
I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, like, if you want, we can talk about what they want to talk about, but like, I'm going to ask anything. They don't have to answer. Um, but I just think the singer thing is weird. And at this point, it's like, I don't even care. I've
Right.
driven a Roof. I've driven a Gunther Works. I've driven a Workshop 5001. If I wanted to drive an Emery, I could call Rod and I could drive an Emery, which I'm going to do soon. I just haven't done it for some reason. My point is, like, I don't think I'm really missing out. And it's just a dumb policy, and I'm against it. You
Sure.
shouldn't ask journalists, you shouldn't put them in that position.
I agree.
Luckily, because I'm not freelance, and most of the people that do this, they're freelancers, and they get assigned, hey, go drive a singer. Like, they got to do it to pay the mortgage. No one's really dying to read my singer review. And I can pay my mortgage and feed my kid without having to write it. But I just think it's a stupid policy on their part. And people should know that every single review they've ever read about a singer read it before they did and
Right.
approved it.
Yeah.
So it's
Which is kind of what makes me think of like, just it makes me a little more. It makes me
yeah.
slightly uneasier when I see that car and everybody says it's so. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's dope. It really really is. But
Ready,
then
ready for this? There's never been a negative word written about it.
no,
Ask why. So
that's
yeah,
it.
it's sort of a funny little scam. And again, look, they're all in the same boat. They're reimagined. Gunther Works is remastered by Gunther Works. They're all afraid that Porsche. Meanwhile, Porsche's loving it. It's like, what? You're taking our used junk and you're turning it into like
$1
eight hundred
million.
thousand
Yeah,
dollar cars. Like, hell yeah! Like, ooh, I got more reworked, rejiggered by like,
you
what
jiggered.
else? What else you got? Like it's so yeah.
I gotcha. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna ask one more question to go ahead and wrap it up here,
Do
Jonny.
it. Do it.
And I'm curious to know, like, so quality video to me has become the go-to for journalism in the last decade. You know that
Yeah.
MT, that's what they did for
Yeah.
a decade. They're doing and then they moved
Yeah.
on with MT on demand, and roadkill's still a thing and killing it, by the way. So I'm curious to know, what do you see, like your own opinion, as the next evolution in quality for outlets such as Motor Trend, such as yourself, going forward? Like, what? Because if video is that, how do you evolve
Yeah.
from video?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, look, I think like, financially,
Mhm.
short term, and maybe like for 5 years, we had to go to a streaming service. And by the way, you're seeing this. Every large content producer has a streaming channel now. Paramount, Peacock, whoever, they're all doing it.
Yeah.
And you just had to. That's just the way that, with the implosion of cable and the way YouTube, like, I remember when we were told, the day we were told, hey, we're going to go to this streaming service, which all of us, all the talent at the time was totally against. and they pulled us all into a room together. We're like, what? Leaving YouTube? Are you high? And they're like, here. And they're like, here is like, I can't remember the year. It was like 2017 or 18. Here's the amount of videos we streamed on YouTube. And it was like, it was like 27 billion views or something just insane. And here's the money we made. It was like 350 some $1,000. And
Ah,
there was like 12 hosts in the room.
right.
And each show, like you look at like Head to Head or Roadkill, which were the big shows, they're about $100,000 an episode to make. So YouTube just changed the way they were paying people. Now, if you're Joe Blow with a camera and you make good car content, and there's like one or two of you and a camera guy, and can you survive with a $360,000 a year business? Sure.
Yeah.
But we had $100,000 an episode. That was just paying salaries basically.
Mhm.
So because we would have two hosts, a director, three camera people, a drone operator, a sound guy, a line producer, a producer, a PA, and then paying to close down roads, rent tracks, pay for Randy Post. Like it was about $100,000 an episode. So
Yeah.
it was just unfeasible at that point. So I don't know what the next evolution is, honestly. It's a great question. Probably some kind of TikTok-y thing that hasn't been invented yet. But I don't know, and I worry about this. Like, man, am I going to age out? Am I going to be irrelevant? I feel like I'm still sort of relevant, but I'm also, I'm a lot older than I used to be. Kids look at me, I might look a little old. Hairline's going away. So I don't know. It's a weird business right now. It's weird to honestly to be at Motor Trend and look at the rest of the industry because we're still kind of in a growth phase.
Mhm.
We're trying all kinds of new stuff, whereas everything else is contracting, and it's just a weird time in the car world. So I don't know. It's probably going to be whoever figures out really great electric car content. So once cars stop sliding around and making so much noise, like, well, what's interesting? How do you film that? Those people will probably succeed. And again, just because everything is going to be electric.
No, I get you. Well, hopefully long-term storytelling, such as what you do, such as the Motor Trend, hopefully hopefully you guys could every once in a while bring something like a head-to-head back. I would love to see it. I know that it's not necessarily feasible and whatnot, but I do hope that at least from a journalistic and writing standpoint, I do hope that long form writing does stay and still remain relevant as it is today.
Well, the writing's definitely going to stay there. Comparison tests do well. And look, we've got two new comparison video series coming out on Motor Trend. One of
Excellent.
them may or may not have the word head to head in the title. So stay tuned. We got some stuff.
Right.
Yeah, we got some stuff coming.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Jonny, thank you. Thank you so much for
Oh, hey,
having come
thank
on
you,
today,
man.
man.
It
It's been
was
an
great
absolute
chatting.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
as we go ahead and wrap it up here, obviously I want to make sure to go ahead and give a shout out to first of all, Clink. I know she's listening. I appreciate
Oh,
that.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. But also, of course, go check out the Inevitable podcast, which can be found on all streaming platforms, and it can also be found on YouTube.
Yep.
You and Ed are doing a great job, and looking forward to the content you guys are going to continue to keep producing.
Thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've done, I think we've done over 40 episodes now. And it's a big production, unlike most podcasts. It's way overproduced. But yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Well, you guys keep doing it.
Yes.
It's completely different to us, but from that perspective, it's you know, you guys are taking it a step further, and you guys are wanting to make sure that people in car culture realize that, hey, just because we're going electric doesn't mean that the sense of car culture isn't going away. And I want people to remember that,
Right.
and whatnot. I think it's really important. And of course,
Thank
Spike's Car Radio, right?
Yes, Spike's Radio is still, yeah, that's yes. You must listen. You must listen.
You must listen.
Yeah.
Spike Ferriston, Paul Zuckerman, and of course Jonny Lieberman, and on occasion Matt Farah and Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, it's very weird. It's weird that when I'm not there, Seinfeld shows up to replace me. I still struggle with how that's my life. But yes, that's true.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
But that being said, go check out at Motor Trend on Instagram and, of course, motortrend.com, and then the streaming service, Motor Trend on Demand. And then you can follow Jonny at Jonny Lieberman on Instagram, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, Jorge, you're pro, man. Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
doing my best, man. I had to
Thanks
do
for
my
the plugs.
research. Hey, you got it, brother. You got it. Well, that being said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. For those listening, I appreciate you all listening. We'll go ahead and catch you guys next time. On behalf of Jonny Lieberman, my name is Jorge Aquino. You've been listening to Tormenting Tarmac, and the enthusiasts never die. Have a great day, everybody.